Okay, I am live. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I'm going to be talking today briefly about the book Strange Fate that I wrote with Jodi Russell, which is now available on Amazon. And the bottom line of the story is, for those who don't know, is that it's about a strange society that met in the middle of the 19th century and built a house called Biddulph Grange in the centre of England, where they performed all these strange mystical rites, I suppose you could call it, and got involved in all sorts of mysticism, spiritualism, the paranormal, in an attempt to change the world. Now, whether they did or not, well, read the book to find out. But it's fascinating from an historical point of view what they did. For a start, and this is what I'm going to be talking about today, the actual place they built and the land they built it on. Now, to begin with, what it was the land in the 1840s where Biddulph Grange was built was basically a megalithic complex. Now, that is for such as like Stonehenge, everybody knows about. It's not just that there was once a stone circle there. There were avenues of stones leading up to it, which have been destroyed many years ago. Those avenues of stones often led to, and it wasn't just Stonehenge, it was many other stone circles throughout the country, some very much bigger. For example, Avebury Stone Circle, about 20 miles north of Stonehenge, that is, it's 1,000 feet in diameter compared to Stonehenge's 100 feet. So it's very much bigger. They had stones up to 40 tons, 100 in a big ring. Around that was an embankment and ditches that would have taken years to create. But around that, there were two huge long avenues of stones. One of them reaches 1.5 miles. That's much of it's still there. There were surrounding stone circles, and those stone circles were joined to the larger stone circle by rows of stones, perhaps placed every 100 yards or so across the countryside. Exactly why these gigantic earthen and stone monuments, these megalithic complexes, were created, nobody really knows. I mean, I've made a few guesses in my book, Wisdom Keepers of Stonehenge, or at least partly, that they were part of a kind of a prehistoric medical complex. These stones may have been used to plot the position of certain stars at certain times of the year so they could be an accurate calendar, so they knew when to cultivate, grow, plant, harvest certain crops that were used for medicinal purposes. But that doesn't explain the size of these things. It certainly doesn't explain all these earthen monuments. There was something else going on. Now, what it was, well, we'll just leave that as a mystery at the moment. But those people back in the mid-19th century at Biddulph Grange seemed to know, at least they believed they knew. And what they did, I won't go into the whole business about how it started. I'll talk about that on another occasion, about this remarkable little girl called Mary Heath, who went into this old tomb and came out psychic, and was able to tell them to build all this stuff. That's another story. I mean, she's a girl. If you've seen my other videos that I've done on YouTube, she is the little girl who inspired the story of Alice Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, that's another story. So what they did is they acquired this land, and the family that were chiefly responsible for this were called the Bateman family, very wealthy industrialists from Stoke-on-Trent in the centre of England. There was another family involved too that were nearby neighbours called the Heath family, another family of industrialists who were very closely involved with business enterprises between the two of them. So they were very close families. And both of them together created this place called Biddulph Grange, which is just to the north of Stoke-on-Trent in the hilly district known as the Peak District of North Staffordshire. And here there was, they acquired this land close to where they lived. On it was quite a large stone circle based on the surveys of the land that were done back in the early 19th century there was something of a fairly large stone circle. We don't exactly know how large. There are no pictures of it or measurements given. And there are a smaller set of surrounding smaller stone circles, and what they call coves of stones, like 3 or 4 very large stones put together in a sort of almost a pyramid shape. If you ever go to Avebury Stone Circle in the south of England, you will know there's a place called the Cove, a number of stones that are placed pretty much in the close to the center of the stone circle there. So there were things like that there at Biddulph too. To the south of the area, a couple of miles away, again, all part of this megalithic complex, there was a sacred spring known as Gorton's Well. And to the north, there was a burial mound about 40 feet across, maybe 20, 30 feet high, covered with earth, like an earthen mound. And obviously inside there was a burial chamber. And next to that, there was another stone circle, which we know because there are pictures drawn of that from as early as the 1700s. It consisted of 10 stones in a circle about 11, 12 feet high, and a couple of stones in the middle, and it was right next to this burial mound. And after little Mary Heath, she was the daughter of one of the people who's responsible for building all this or being involved in the whole thing, Robert Heath. She was only 7.5 years old, and she went into this tomb and she came out saying that she'd developed these strange psychic powers. Nobody believed her until she actually proved it. But I mean, she told people things about themselves they couldn't know, but that wasn't enough for many until she showed them on an old ruined priory, an old ecclesiastical building not far from where they lived at the time, a few miles to the south. She led them there and she said, if you dig in the corner of this ruin in that certain position, as she told them, you'll find a stone slab. If you remove that, you'll find an underground vault. And in that vault, you will find various treasures, is the word she used, as far as I know. Anyway, they went there. It was there. They actually found a number of Knights Templar tombs dating from the 1100s. Those tomb slabs that were found there are all around the local church now. They were moved away to new consecrated ground at St. Leonard's Church in Biddulph itself, the little town of Biddulph, and they're there all around the outside of the church. Now you can see them. So we know that this definitely happened. They also said that they found in there various items that not that the Knights Templars had put in there, but some of their successors, the Rosicrucians, in about the year 1600 or the early 1600s, they'd sealed up a number of lead boxes with manuscripts in, all supposed to be about how to perform various rituals to change fate in whatever culture they happen to accept, perhaps Kabbalism, ancient Egyptian magic, something like this. The problem is we don't really know what they found there in these sealed containers, because they were in the late 1890s, Biddulph Grange burnt down. A lot of this stuff seems to have gone with it, although there is 1 or 2 suggestions, and that's another story I'll be telling later on in another one of these talks, that these items were hidden somewhere else when the group disbanded in the early 20th century. And they left clues as to where these might be in the form of a series of stained glass windows. But that's another story. I'll go on to that another time. But coming back to these ancient sites that were there. So this little girl proved herself that she could, find things and know things she couldn't possibly have known normally. And they believed her. And of course, they'd found all these documents which suggested that they build these ancient shrines from different periods of history and different cultures. And they built them on the site of the existing ancient sites, megalithic sites that could go back 5,000 years. So on the stone circle in the middle, they built the Grange itself. And under Biddulph Grange, they constructed a Roman temple. And in that temple, they had an artifact that little Mary claimed to have found in the tomb, which was a small rose quartz stone about so big, which was about 2 inches wide, 2 inches long, about 3/4 of an inch wide, carved into the shape of a heart. It's nothing special. I'll talk about how we went in search of and found that in another one of these YouTube talks. But the actual that stone was thought to them to be very important. They kept it in this Roman temple in which there was a statue to the goddess Fortuna, who was supposed to be the goddess of fate, fortune, time, and reality in Roman mysticism. So they built this temple under the house itself. They built another temple where one of these smaller stone circles had been an Egyptian recreation of an Egyptian tomb with a statue in the center of it of a demigod called Ani, also known as the Ape of Thoth, who in Egyptian mysticism was a being in charge of fate, fortune, and, you guessed, time and reality. They did a Chinese one on where one of these coves was actually, this arrangement of stones was. In the grounds of they're all about a few hundred yards away from the house, in grounds that were fantastically decorated with plants from all over the world, which James Bateman, who actually owned the property, traveled the world collecting. So it's an astonishing sight to see these plants from all over the world that bloom there. And it's open to the public, the grounds. You can't go in the house itself, or not most of it, because it's now been converted into luxury apartments. But people can go around the grounds, and they're amazing. You can see these temples, not the Roman one because it's under the main house, but the Egyptian, the Roman one, and also this Chinese one, which was erected where the cove once was. It still consists of some of these stones that are there, but it's a pool with a pagoda building, and it literally looks like the classic willow pattern that you get on old Wedgwood pottery, with a little bridge and the overhanging weeping willows and all that sort of thing. And so they built that there, and they also had, it's no longer still there, a statue of the Chinese Lady of the Moon. Her name is Chang'e. I really haven't pronounced it right, but it's something like that. Anybody in China is familiar with her because she is celebrated each year in the autumn time with moon festivals in which they eat moon cake and have celebrations. So anyway, this sacred shrine was sacred to her, and you've guessed it, she's not really a deity, she's more a spirit being who was in charge of fate, fortune, destiny, time, and so forth, just like these other creatures. And finally they also built a Celtic shrine. They kind of got it wrong. They thought that this that the Celts were responsible for building this megalithic stuff, and so they recreated a Celtic shrine in the form of an ancient form of a spring coming from the rocks. Water comes out into a pool and a series of little rivers going through a glen. But what's interesting is they kind of got it right in a sense, partly right, because this tomb to the north of where they were, the stone circle was megalithic, perhaps as much as 4,000 or 5,000 years old. But the tomb was only 1,500 years old and came from the Celtic period of post-Roman Britain. So calling it a Celtic shrine, what might have been good. So anyway, they built a Celtic shrine in the area in another part of the gardens. And this Celtic shrine, there was, again, we're looking for this. We believe it might be in the Stoke-on-Trent Potteries Museum, or at least parts of it broken up, because we found parts of what was in the Roman temple under the house in the Potteries Museum in Stoke-on-Trent, away in storage. But we also believe that somewhere there might be the statue of a person from Celtic mythology called Bride. After incidentally, the tomb and the stone circle where little Mary found this heart and came out claiming to be psychic, that is known as the Bride Stones, named after her. And she's known as a Celeste. She's not really a goddess. She's kind of more than that. She's an entity, and you can guess what she was in charge of in Celtic mythology. She oversaw fate, fortune, and reality. So this is why they created these old shrines on existing ancient monuments in the belief that they could somehow either do meditational practices, perform some sort of ceremonies, or whatever else they did to help and try and change fate in the world. Whether they did or not is another story I shall be talking about late in another one of these YouTube talks. So that's it for the moment. I will just look to see if anyone sent any messages. Oh, there's a lot of something here. Moderation helps everyone feel safe. Let's close that. All right. Somebody said, Paul has said, hi, Graham and peeps. There we go. Hello back there, Paul. So anyway, thank you for watching. Those who are, obviously this is going to go up and stay on my YouTube. So feel free to comment. And I shall try and do quite a few more of these now. I've got a bit more time. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Bye for now.